All right, I've been saying it for a long time that if we have skewed data, we need to use the interquartile range. Well, here is where we actually start talking about and introducing what the interquartile range is. Again, October is really friendly tonight, really active. So we're going to start by looking at, again, reviewing the median really quickly, because the interquartile range is really closely tied to the median. So again, for the median, if there's an odd number of values, right, then this is the median right here. And if there's an even number of values, then what we do is, again, it's right in the middle. Median's always in the middle, as long as it's sorted from least to greatest. But in this case, we had to take the average of the two middle numbers, because if there's an even number, then there's two middle numbers. So another way of talking about the median, you can also call the median Q2. That has to do with the second quartile. Quartile comes from the word quarter for a fourth. Okay, so the second fourth, like, 1/4 and then another fourth, that's 1/2. Median is 1/2, also known as the 50th percentile. You ever heard like, oh, 99th percentile, that means you're in the top 1%. 50th percentile means top 50%. It means 50% of the data is below that value. The first quartile, which is called Q1, the first quarter of the data, is the 25th percentile, which means that 25% of the data is below that value. So I'm pretty sure at this point you can fill in the next one, right? The third quartile, Q3, that's the 75th percentile, which means that 75% of the data is below that value. Okay. And that's most of this video, honestly. We'll talk about a couple more definitions though, tie it all together. So when we say 5-number summary, this is just 5 numbers. Bet you didn't see that one coming. It's basically just 5 numbers that summarize the data. All right. So it's the 5 numbers are the minimum, the first quartile, the median, right? Median's also known as the second quartile, third quartile, and the max. So this is just one way of kind of describing things. And then the range is just the difference between the max and the minimum. Range, in this case, a lot of times when we talk about functions, we talk about domain and range. This is a different usage of the word range. This is stats range, okay, which is different. So the range is just what's the difference between the biggest and the smallest value. Okay. Interquartile range, aka IQR, has to do with spread. It's like the standard deviation of skewed data. Okay. But it's just like, it measures spread just in a different way. And it's just, what is the difference between the third quartile and the first quartile? It's the middle 50% of the data, in other words. So let's kind of look at, again, we did this a little bit before. This is what data set B used to look like. What was the top one? 20. Right? It used to look like this. And then we said, well, we'll get into it in the next problem. How is the 5-number summary changed? What about the range? What about the IQR? So let's figure things out about the before, which we'll do in blue, and the after, which we'll do in red. Okay? So before, the 5-number summary is the minimum, Q1, the median, also known as Q2, the third quartile, and the max. So before, the minimum was 3. After we changed the data, the minimum was still 3, right? The minimum is 3 in both of these data sets. All right, before the first quartile, let's skip the first quartile. It's always easiest to start with the median and the max. So the median, we said that before, the second quartile is 13.5. The median is just what's in the middle. What's the middle data point? In this case, there's two middles, so we take the average. Well then, after we change the data, we showed this before, the median is still the same, right? The median is still 13.5. So that hasn't changed either. The maximum has changed though, right? The maximum is different. So the maximum used to be 20, and now it's 205. So let's talk about finding the quartiles now. Well, we won't be doing a lot of quartile finding by hand. We'll be using GeoGebra, which is at the end of this video. But to find the quartiles, you just divide the data in half. You don't count the median. And then you look at what's in the middle. What's the median of each side? So the median of these three is 8, and the median of these three is 18. Those are the quartiles. Okay? The quartiles are just the median of each half. So this is 8. This is 18. Well, if it's 8 here, it's also 8 up there. If it's 18 here, it's also 18 here. So these quartiles aren't changing either. Still 8, still 18. So how does the 5-number summary change? Well, the answer is it almost doesn't change at all. Right? 4 out of 5 numbers in the 5-number summary are the same. So even though an outlier normally has a huge effect on stats. But when we're talking about, when we're using interquartile range and medians, outliers are much easier to handle, which is really nice. Okay, let's look at the range and the IQR. Let's see how those changed. So before, the range was the biggest minus the smallest. So 17 minus 3. Sorry, 20 minus 3 is 17. And afterwards, if we subtract the biggest from the smallest, 202. Okay, so the range changed a lot. Right, let's write that down. Range is really affected by outliers. Really different. What about the IQR? IQR, well, maybe we don't remember what that is. IQR is just what's the difference between the third and first quartile. You just go over here and say, all right, what's the difference between these two quartiles? So 18 minus 8, that's 10. 18 minus 8, right? This 18 minus that 8 is also 10. In this case, the IQR doesn't change at all. Interesting. Which again is why we talk about IQR with skewed data instead of standard deviation. Standard deviation, we showed in the last video, standard deviation changed a ton with outliers, but IQR doesn't. So especially these two things right here, this is why we use medians and IQR, interquartile range, for skewed data. Oh, it doesn't quite fit. This word right here is for, F-O-R. Doesn't quite fit. It's all slightly different dimensions on the video recording. All right, and that is the end.